My name is Claire Donovan. I'm 29 years old, a licensed child therapist with a specialty in autism spectrum disorders. But none of that matters when your resume ends up in the trash the moment they see former foster youth on your housing application. We're going in a different direction. The woman at the front desk had said 2 weeks ago. She didn't even look up. That's when I realized the dream of building a private practice, of staying in Boston, of being someone it was slipping, fast. My bank account was bleeding. My last client had vanished after hearing gossip from a clinic I was wrongly accused of stealing from. I had been pushed out, one rejection at a time, until all that was left was the thrum of anxiety in my chest and the quiet question I asked myself each night. How long until I disappear completely? Then came the call. 3 months. No weekends off. Live-in therapist for a teenage girl with chronic illness. Her father, Jonathan Reeves. The name sounded familiar. Later, I realized I'd seen him in Forbes hedge fund tycoon turned widowed recluse in Vermont. I almost said no, until he said the pay was 5 times the going rate. Until he said, "My daughter needs someone who doesn't leave when it gets hard." He didn't know it, but he just echoed the only compliment I'd ever received that mattered: you don't quit. So I said yes. I packed everything I owned into a suitcase with a broken wheel, pulled my fraying coat tighter, and told myself, this isn't running away. This is running towards something. The morning I left Boston, the sky was a flat gray, and the wind off the Charles River cut through my clothes like knives. A black SUV pulled up outside my building right at 8:00 a.m. A man stepped out mid-30s, tall, kind eyes behind square glasses. "Claire Donovan, yeah. Name's Jason Miller. I'll be your driver today." He took my suitcase without a word about its duct-taped side. Inside the car, I watched the city blur into suburbs, then hills, then nothing but forest. Vermont in late autumn isn't a postcard. It's a whisper of death. Leaves bleeding amber and gold, clinging like hope that never lasts. And something about that felt familiar. For 3 hours, we drove. Jason didn't talk much, which I appreciated. Silence was safer than small talk. I used the time to reread the email confirmation. Live-in position. Must provide emotional and behavioral support. No breaks for first 90 days. Client Sophie Reeves, 16. Autoimmune disorder. ASD diagnosis. Prior therapist terminated or quit within weeks. Compensation $15,000, month plus room and board. No visitors. No external obligations. Must maintain confidentiality. By the time we turned onto a long driveway lined with maples clinging to their last golden leaves, my fingers were sore from clenching the binder in my lap. And then I saw it. The house, no. The estate. 3 stories of dark stone and glass, perched on a hill like a watchtower. It didn't say welcome. It said, don't get too comfortable. Jonathan Reeves was waiting on the steps. I had imagined someone taller. He was broad-shouldered but not imposing, his hair graying at the temples. A look in his eyes that I recognized immediately, the exhausted terror of someone trying to hold a life together by sheer force of will. "Ms. Donovan, Mr. Reeves, thank you for the opportunity." My voice cracked a little on the last word. He gave a tight nod. "Let's talk in my study." Inside, the house surprised me. It wasn't cold marble and modern sterility like I expected. There were family photos on the walls, snapshots, not portraits, a woman laughing in the kitchen, a little girl with a toy giraffe, a boy hugging his sister. Love had lived here once. In the study, he sat across from me, the fireplace glowing low behind him. Sophie is 16, diagnosed at 3, high-functioning autism, but extremely withdrawn. Her autoimmune disorder weakens her immune system. She's been homeschooled for years. No close friends. Doesn't speak much. Is she violent? No, but she doesn't trust people, especially professionals. I nodded. I'm not here to fix her, just to be present. His jaw tightened, then relaxed. That's what we need, someone who won't flinch or run. He handed me a binder thick, meticulously labeled, schedules, triggers, medication logs. As I flipped through, he added, there's no room for inconsistency, no last-minute changes. Sophie notices everything. I paused. What happened to the last therapist? She left after 10 days. Said she couldn't handle the silence. I glanced up. His eyes softened, just barely. Then we have an agreement. I swallowed. Yes. He stood and extended a hand. Dinner's at 6. You'll meet Sophie after. My room was in the west wing. Warm, quiet. The quilt on the bed looked handmade. Outside the window, a forest stretched endlessly, trees shaking their dying leaves like prayers. Maggie, the housekeeper, introduced herself with a smile and an Irish lilt. I've been here 30 years, she said. Raised my own boy in this house. If you need anything, come find me. She paused, looking at me more closely. You got that look. What looked like someone who's used to disappearing? I didn't reply, but she was right. At dinner, I met the rest of the household. Jonathan sat at the head of the table, composed but watchful. To his right sat a tall woman with polished hair and eyes like mirrors. This is Brittany, Jonathan said. She handles the upstairs rooms. Welcome, Brittany said, her smile tight. Caretaker number 6, is it? I blinked. Excuse me. Oh, nothing. You'll see. Across from her sat Ryan O'Connor, groundskeeper. Maggie's son, quiet, solid, sun-kissed skin and hands that looked like they'd rebuilt the world a few times. Jason joined late, laughing softly and making the room feel less like a museum. What struck me wasn't the food or the table, it was that everyone ate together. No hierarchy, no walls. Except for Brittany's eyes. They never left Jonathan, not once. After dinner, Jonathan asked if I had the energy to meet Sophie. I said yes. We walked down a dim hallway, lined with books and photos. At one point, I stopped at a picture Sophie, maybe 3 years old, holding that toy giraffe, her curls messy, her smile soft. She hasn't smiled in 2 years, Jonathan said quietly. Then he knocked on the door. Inside, Sophie sat on her bed, knees pulled to her chest, eyes fixed on the floor. The air smelled faintly of antiseptic and lavender. She didn't look at me. Sophie, Jonathan said gently. This is Claire. She'll be helping out. No response, just a small twitch of her fingers. Jonathan touched my arm. She doesn't warm up to anyone. Don't take it personally. I nodded, but I already knew. This wasn't about me. It was about survival. Hers, mine. That night, I lay awake, listening to the hum of the heater and the silence pressing in. I thought about Sophie's eyes, Jonathan's desperation, and the thin crack I felt forming in the wall I'd spent years building around my heart. I reached for my notebook, my emotional journal, the one no one else had ever read. I flipped to a page I wrote the night I almost quit therapy for good. Maybe I wasn't built for this. Maybe some of us are meant to survive, not save. I looked at the sentence, then crossed out the last part. Underneath, I wrote, maybe both. And then a knock came. Not on my door. From deep inside the house, 3 soft taps. Then silence. I froze. Was it Sophie? Was it something else? I opened the door, and everything changed. The knock never came again. I waited by the door, heart pounding like it wanted out of my chest. But the hallway stayed still, wrapped in the kind of silence that feels too intentional. When I finally stepped out, there was no one there. Just that long stretch of carpeted floor, lit dimly by antique sconces, and a faint hum coming from Sophie's room down the hall. Maybe the air purifier. Maybe something else. I didn't sleep much that night. The next morning, I pulled my hair back into a messy bun and grabbed the brown notebook I always carried my emotional field log, the one I never showed anyone. It was already creased, pages warped from years of doubt and sweat. I knocked gently on Sophie's door. No answer. But I opened it anyway. She was in the same spot as last night, sitting on the edge of her bed, knees drawn up, staring at nothing. Her hair hung like a curtain, shielding her from the world. "Good morning, Sophie. May I come in?" No response, but no protest either. I sat down on the floor a few feet away, not close enough to threaten, not far enough to feel like I didn't care. "I brought coffee," I said quietly. "For me, but Maggie made cinnamon scones. Smells like Christmas in there." Still nothing. So I just sat. Talked about stupid things, the frost on the window, how the maple trees looked like they were on fire yesterday, how my old apartment in Boston never smelled like anything but burnt radiator dust. 20 minutes passed. I thought she'd never move. Then she stood, walked past me, and headed for the kitchen. It was barely anything, but it was everything. Jonathan was already there, reading something on his tablet, glasses pushed halfway down his nose. When Sophie walked in, he froze, then softened. "Morning," he said, brushing a kiss to her head. She didn't flinch, but she didn't respond either. I sat beside her. Maggie placed 2 plates in front of us, full of eggs, toast, and those cinnamon scones. Sophie didn't eat much, but she stayed. Brittany walked in a few minutes later, flawless as always lip gloss, fitted uniform dress that somehow screamed, "I belong more than you." She sipped her coffee like it was champagne. "So," she said, smiling at me over the rim of her mug, "how's day 1, Sophie, let you survive the night?" I kept my face neutral. "It's just starting." You'll see. She's particular." Jonathan glanced at her. A flash of disapproval crossed his face, but he said nothing. Brittany didn't seem to care. She turned back to her phone, fingers tapping a little too fast. Sophie's shoulders tightened. Message received. After breakfast, I followed Sophie as she drifted toward the greenhouse. She didn't say anything, but I recognized the pattern: same pace, same path, autonomy wrapped in routine. Inside the greenhouse, the air was warmer, full of soft, earthy scents. Wilted basil, sleeping rose bushes, a few tulip bulbs buried in dirt, waiting for spring. Sophie stood near a pot with a dying lavender plant. Her hand hovered above it, but didn't touch. "It's not dead," I said, "just tired." Her fingers twitched. "That's what my old therapist used to say about me," I added. I think she meant well. She didn't look at me, but I stayed. Later that afternoon, Jonathan asked me to meet him in his study. He stood by the window, arms crossed, looking out at the trees dusted with frost. "I wanted to tell you more," he said, voice quieter than usual. "Not the chart, the truth." I sat, notebook in my lap, hands steady. "Sophie was our miracle baby." He began, "my wife, Catherine, and I tried for years. When she finally got pregnant, it was everything." He paused. "The pregnancy was hard. Catherine had a heart condition. Doctors said continuing could kill her. She refused termination." My throat tightened. "She gave birth, died a week later. Sophie never knew her." He looked at me then, eyes dull with old grief. "And somehow, my daughter came into this world already sick." He explained the autoimmune disorder, how Sophie's body attacked itself, how they tried everything: tutors, therapy, experimental diets, detox retreats. Some helped, most didn't. "I don't want you to fix her," he said finally. I just want someone who won't vanish. I don't vanish, I said before I could stop myself. He studied me, then nodded once. That night, I sat in my room and opened my notebook. The page I landed on was from last winter. I keep trying to be unbreakable, but maybe that's not the goal. Maybe the goal is not breaking alone. I closed it and slid it under my pillow. By the fourth day, I introduced a small box of paints. Watercolors, soft pastels, nothing messy. Sophie ignored me at first. I placed them on her desk when she wasn't looking. She didn't touch them, but she also didn't throw them away. That evening, Brittany made sure to walk past us in the hallway, brushing her shoulder against mine just hard enough to be noticed. Oh, by the way, she said loudly enough for Sophie to hear. Most caretakers last about a month, give or take. Sophie's spine stiffened. I didn't respond, not then. But something inside me hardened. This wasn't just a job. It was a war of presence, and I refused to lose. Day 5, I found Sophie curled by the window, sketching. I brought in the paints again. This time, I asked, "Want me to put these away?" She didn't answer. So I stepped closer, gently placed the box by her chair. And that's when it happened. She lashed out, not violently, but enough to knock the box off the table. Paint spilled everywhere. Her breath hitched, chest rising too fast. Panic. I froze, then dropped to her level. It's okay. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to change anything. She didn't look at me, but she whispered, almost too soft to catch, "Don't change things." My chest tightened. "Okay," I whispered. "No changes unless you say so." 30 minutes later, she let me gather the paints and seal the box shut again. She watched every motion like it meant something. And maybe it did. After she went to bed, I sat in the kitchen with Maggie. She poured tea like it was medicine. "You're getting to her," she said softly. "I don't know," I replied. "It's like standing in a storm and hoping the wind notices you." She noticed. I sipped the tea. She's noticed everything. The next morning, Jonathan caught me in the hallway. "She said your name," he whispered, "last night, to me." My heart stopped. "Just said Claire, that's all, but that's more than I've heard in months." Then he smiled. It wasn't wide, but it was real. And it felt like the first brick in a foundation I hadn't dared to imagine. That night, I sat by my window, notebook in hand, trying to process it all. Then I heard it again. 3 soft knocks. This time, followed by the sound of claws. "Tim?" A dog. No one had said anything about a dog, but something inside me lit up. I opened the door and met a pair of liquid brown eyes that would change everything. The dog was massive. A Newfoundland black fur, thick like velvet. Eyes the color of dark coffee, soft and still. He didn't bark or move, just stood there in the hallway like he belonged. Jason appeared behind him with a leash in hand. Sorry he slipped past me. We just brought him in this morning. Name's Tim. "Tim," I repeated, stunned. Jonathan joined a moment later, slightly out of breath. "I meant to tell you. We're trying something new. You mentioned therapy animals. I didn't expect it to happen so fast." He gave a slight smile. "You're not the only one who doesn't quit when things get hard." Tim slowly padded toward me, nose twitching. When I crouched down, he sat, right at my feet. "He's trained?" I asked. "Rescue. Former therapy dog," Jason said. "Good with routines, even better with quiet." I glanced at Jonathan. Does Sophie know? "She's about to..." Introducing a dog into a household like this, into Sophie's carefully managed world, was a risk. A big one. But when I brought Tim to her door and knocked gently, something in my gut said try. "Sophie, it's Claire. I have someone I'd like you to meet." No answer, but I opened the door anyway. She was curled up on the bed, sketchpad in hand. Her eyes flicked toward me, then to the dog. Her whole body went still. "He's friendly," I said. "Would you like me to take him away?" Nothing. Her fingers trembled. Then, barely audible, "He can stay." Tim stepped forward, slow as fog, and lay down at her feet. Didn't touch her, didn't demand anything. Sophie just watched him. And then, her hand moved. She touched his fur, once, then again, longer this time. Her eyes met mine for a breath, then darted away. But that glance had held something I hadn't seen yet. Curiosity. Over the next few days, Tim became part of the fabric of the house. He followed Sophie from room to room, sat with her during breakfast, curled up beside her in the greenhouse. At night, he lay at the foot of her bed like a silent sentinel. I caught her whispering to him when she thought no one was around. "Stay. Good boy." One morning, I found her brushing his coat, humming under her breath. When she noticed me in the doorway, she blinked, then said softly, "He likes it." It was the longest sentence she'd spoken to me. I nodded. "He does. And he likes you." Her lips twitched almost a smile. Not quite, but enough to break me a little inside. That night, Jonathan stopped me in the hallway. "She told me about Tim," he said, voice hoarse. "She hasn't voluntarily shared anything with me in years." "She's doing the work," I said. "I'm just here." "No," he said quietly. "You're more than that." But not everyone in the house was celebrating. Brittany's attitude shifted. She started watching me more closely, lingering in rooms longer than necessary, commenting on things she had no business noticing. "Claire," she said one afternoon, walking into the kitchen uninvited, "you left Sophie's medication binder open. That's a liability." "I didn't," I said calmly. "It was closed when I left." She tilted her head, fake concern painting her face. "You sure might want to double-check. Wouldn't want the wrong dosage going out, right?" Maggie looked up from her baking and narrowed her eyes. "I was in here all morning. Claire didn't leave anything open." Brittany's smile didn't budge, just trying to help. She turned on her heel and left. Maggie muttered under her breath, "That girl's sugar's gone sour." I started watching my back. Not because I feared Brittany could hurt me, but because I knew what people like her could do with the right rumor in the right ear. It was how I lost my second job. A whispered accusation, a drawer left unlocked. And suddenly I was the girl who stole meds. No proof, no apology, just silence. I wasn't going through that again. Tim helped calm the house, even for me. His presence grounded something in all of us. Sophie began joining meals again. One night, she sat at the kitchen table, sketching, Tim's massive head in her lap. She didn't speak, but she didn't need to. Jonathan stood in the doorway, watching her. A kind of fear flickered behind his eyes, like he wanted to believe this was real, but didn't dare hope too hard. He caught me looking. "What did you do?" "Nothing magical," I said. "I just kept showing up." He nodded, almost to himself. "Sometimes, that's all it takes." The next day, I sat with Ryan on the back porch, sipping coffee while frost kissed the railings. Sophie was inside, napping with Tim curled around her. "She's different with him," Ryan said. "She's different with everything lately." "You're part of that too." I shrugged. "I'm just trying not to mess it up." "You're doing more than that." There was something about Ryan quiet, steady, unbothered by silences. It made it easier to breathe. He glanced sideways. "You like it here?" The question caught me off guard. "Yeah, more than I expected." He nodded, and that was it. No probing, no explanations, just understanding. A few days later, an invitation came in. My best friend back in Boston was having a farewell party. She'd landed a dream job in Seattle. I didn't plan to go, But when Jonathan saw the email sitting open on the kitchen counter, he asked, "Why not?" "I'm supposed to be here. No weekends off. Remember?" He shook his head. "We'll manage. You've earned one night." I hesitated, then packed my overnight bag. Boston was loud, smothering, full of things I didn't miss: the traffic, the faces that didn't look you in the eye, the constant performance of success. At the party, I smiled and hugged and answered the usual questions. "Where are you now? What are you doing?" When I said I was working full-time as a live-in therapist in Vermont, the responses were mixed. "Oh, wow. So you left the city? That sounds isolating." "That's gotta be temporary, right?" But the worst part wasn't the questions. It was him. Vlad. He used to be my boyfriend, until I found out I was a bet part of some sick game between him and his friends. "Can you get the damaged girl to fall for you?" He spotted me near the bar. "Claire Donovan. Thought you vanished." I froze. "Word is you finally ran off to hide somewhere quiet." "Figures. Still playing savior. Still thinking you can fix broken things." My chest tightened. Then, before I could speak, a voice came from behind me. "Back off." "Ryan." I turned, stunned. He stepped forward, placing himself between us. Vlad smirked. "Who the hell are you?" "Someone who doesn't tolerate garbage." Vlad backed off quickly, cowered beneath the bravado, and disappeared into the crowd. "You okay?" Ryan asked, his voice low. "Yeah, just ghosts I didn't expect." He didn't push. He just stayed close the rest of the night. When we returned to Vermont the next day, snow had started falling. Sophie was waiting at the door, Tim by her side. Her eyes flicked up. "You came back." "I promised," I said softly. And then she did something that made Jonathan, standing behind her, drop his coffee mug. She smiled. Just once. But it reached her eyes. Sophie's smile was small, barely a curl of her lips, but it hit like sunlight after years of winter. Jonathan froze. His hand, mid-reach for the front door, trembled slightly before gripping the handle like he needed to ground himself. Maggie peeked around the corner, eyes wide. "Well, I'll be," she whispered, pressing her fingers to her lips. Sophie didn't seem to notice the weight of the moment. She simply turned and walked inside, Tim close at her heel, as if nothing monumental had just happened. But something had shifted. Not just in her, but in all of us. That evening, she didn't retreat to her room like usual. She sat at the kitchen table while Maggie stirred soup on the stove, sketchpad open, pencil moving in slow, deliberate strokes. Tim lay curled beneath her chair like a shadow. I pulled up a seat a few feet away, careful not to interrupt her rhythm. Jonathan hovered at the edge of the room, pretending to be absorbed in an email, though his eyes kept flicking toward her like he was afraid to blink and lose it all. She looked up once, catching me watching. "What's your favorite color?" she asked. My breath caught. Not because of the question, but because she was asking. "Green," I said gently. "Emerald green, like the maple trees before they turn." She stared for a second, then went back to drawing. The next morning, I found a folded sheet of paper on the kitchen counter. It was a sketch. Me, sitting by the window, reading. Tim sprawled at my feet. Sophie's figure was tucked in the corner, watching from a distance. At the bottom, she had written in careful block letters, "Thanks for staying." I had to sit down. My hands trembled as I folded it back, slid it into the back of my notebook, my field log of emotions I never let anyone read. Except maybe, now. Maybe I wasn't the only one healing. Jonathan found me in the hallway that night, eyes bright with something like disbelief. "You've done more in 3 weeks than I could in 3 years, he said. I shook my head. It's not magic. It's time. It's trust. "And Tim?" he added, smiling faintly. He ran a hand through his graying hair, suddenly looking younger than he had in weeks. Catherine used to say people aren't puzzles to be solved. They're gardens to be tended. His voice cracked slightly. You've tended something I thought was already lost. I didn't know what to say. So I nodded. Sometimes silence speaks louder than gratitude. Ryan and I had started spending more time together, though we never really called it that. He'd stop by the porch to check on the shutters, or join me during my morning coffee runs into town when I had 30 minutes to breathe. Once, he helped me carry in a delivery of dog supplies. Tim's new brush, a heated pad for the colder nights. Sophie insisted it be the same color as the scarf I wore, deep green. You're part of her pattern now, Ryan said one day, brushing snow off his jacket. Is that a good thing? It means she expects you to stay. He didn't say the rest, but I heard it anyway. Don't prove her wrong. And that something happened I didn't see coming. It started with a conversation. Jonathan and I were in the study, reviewing Sophie's latest therapy notes. She'd begun humming again, quietly, mostly when drawing. She had asked Maggie to teach her how to bake just once, and she was letting me open her curtains in the morning without protest. Progress. But Jonathan looked distracted. There's something I need to ask, he said, eyes avoiding mine. Okay. I know your contract was 3 months, but if you want to stay past that, I'd like to offer you a permanent role here, whatever that looks like. My chest tightened. Not because of the offer, but because of what it meant. I'd never been offered permanence before. Jobs, housing, relationships, everything in my life had been temporary, provisional, one misstep away from vanishing. Even foster homes came with expiration dates. I don't know what to say. He smiled. Say yes, or say you'll think about it. I nodded slowly. I'll think about it. But the truth was, deep down, I already wanted to say yes. Later that night, I sat by the window, sketch in my lap, notebook open. I flipped to a page I hadn't touched in years. One I wrote after losing my second job to those lies. You can be good at what you do, and still lose. All it takes is one whisper. I closed my eyes. That whisper had nearly broken me, had made me hide behind baggy sweaters and thick glasses, had made me terrified to ever be seen again. But not here. Not anymore. And just when I thought I could breathe, I found something. It was subtle, a single page missing from Sophie's med binder. I knew the system, knew how Jonathan filed things. But someone had removed a dosage log. When I asked Maggie about it, she frowned. I haven't touched that file. And I know you haven't. So that leaves... We both glanced toward the hallway. Brittany. I didn't confront her. Not yet. Instead, I replaced the missing page with a photocopy I had kept in my room. I knew every dose by heart. But I did one more thing. I slipped my notebook under my mattress, the real one, not the one I carried around. Just in case. Because if someone wanted to make me look negligent again, they wouldn't find a way this time. The next day, I found Sophie sitting on the back porch. It was cold, snowflakes drifting lazily down, but she was bundled in a thick green coat. Tim at her side. She looked up at me. Do you ever feel like you don't belong anywhere? The question hit harder than I expected. All the time, I said softly. I used to feel like I was always on the outside looking in. She stared at the snow for a while. What changed? She asked. I took a deep breath. I found people who didn't make me feel like I had to earn my place, who let me stay, even when I thought I didn't deserve it. She didn't reply, but her fingers curled into Tim's fur. And when I looked over, Jonathan was standing at the glass door, watching. His eyes were wet. That night, I returned to my room and found the door slightly ajar. Not wide, just cracked. My notebook, the one under my pillow, wasn't where I left it. I checked the dresser. My drawer had been opened. And sitting on top of my folded sweater was the original dosage log. Folded, neat. Back in its place, as if nothing had happened. My hands were shaking. The dosage log was back, neatly folded, placed exactly where it would seem like it had never left. But I knew it had, and whoever had taken it had been inside my room. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, gripping my real notebook, my emotional journal, with both hands, thumb pressed against the page I'd written just days ago. You can be good, careful, even silent, and they'll still come for you. Brittany, it had to be her. But why? To frame me. To test how close she could get to making me fall. Or worse, was she trying to shake Sophie's progress? The next morning, I found her in the hallway near the linen closet. Her smile was syrup sweet. Everything okay? You look a little restless. I stared at her. I slept fine, I said, voice flat. Her eyes sparkled. Good. You should get your rest. This job can really wear a person down. Just ask the last one. I took a step closer. I know what you did. Her lips parted, amused. Did what? You opened my drawer. She blinked, mock confusion setting in. Claire, are you okay? That sounds paranoid. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. Because I'd learned long ago, people like Brittany don't crumble when confronted. They only shift the spotlight, make you look like the unstable one. So I did what I always did. I observed. The following days, I became deliberate. I made decoy mistakes, leaving a training binder unattended in the sunroom. Pretending to forget a key code, I kept a folded tissue wedged in the doorframe of my room, barely visible. If someone came in while I was gone, it would fall. Each night, I checked. Each time, the tissue was undisturbed. Until Tuesday. That night, it was on the floor. I went to Maggie. She listened, arms crossed, eyes hardening. She's always been ambitious, she muttered. Wanted more than the housekeeper title. Got her eyes on Jonathan for years. But why sabotage Sophie's care? Maggie looked at me like the answer was obvious. Because Sophie's condition is what keeps Jonathan rooted. The moment things start healing, he looks up and maybe sees who's been holding the house together all along. And that isn't her. My stomach turned. I had seen the way Brittany looked at him. But it wasn't love. It was calculation. So I made a plan. I didn't want to destroy her. I just wanted her to stop. And for that, I needed proof. I remembered something Jonathan once said in passing: the security system logs all interior movement if armed manually. I waited for a morning when Brittany thought no one was watching. Then I armed the system. Quietly. Room by room. That afternoon, I left a marked dosage sheet on my desk, only slightly altered, but just enough to notice. Then I went into town with Ryan. He took me to a diner just off the main road, red vinyl booths, weak coffee, and the kind of pancakes that made your fingers stick to the fork. We sat by the window. You've been quiet, he said gently. Just watching. You always watching something? It's how I've survived. He studied me. You don't have to do that here. I smiled weakly. I wish that were true. Then I looked at him. Really looked. Ryan, do you believe in second chances? His answer came without hesitation. I believe in people who fight for them. I wanted to cry. Instead, I stirred my coffee and whispered, "Thank you." When we got back, I checked the system logs. Movement registered in my room at 2:12 p.m. I waited until everyone was asleep. Then I went to Jonathan's office. He was there, half asleep in the leather chair, reading Sophie's latest sketch, a picture of him holding her hand while Tim watched from the corner. She drew this last night, he said quietly. I didn't think she even noticed when I sit beside her. She notices everything, I whispered. He looked up. What is it, Claire? I showed him the security log, then the dosage sheet I had planted, then the original that had vanished and returned. He read it all, carefully, thoroughly. Then he looked at me, and something inside him cracked. "I trusted her," he said, almost to himself. "I brought her into this house." "She wants you distracted," I said gently. "As long as Sophie stays unwell, she stays needed." Jonathan didn't speak for a while. Finally, he stood, walked to the door, and said, "Thank you for telling me." The next morning, Brittany was gone. No goodbye. No scene. Jason later told me she packed in silence, left a short note on the counter. It was never going to be enough, was it? Jonathan didn't speak of her again. But that night, he came to the porch where I sat with Sophie. He placed a cup of tea beside me, then looked at her. "You're getting stronger," he said. She didn't respond, but she moved closer to me, just an inch. And he saw it. That was enough. Sophie's healing accelerated. She started asking questions, tiny ones at first. "What kind of dog is Tim? What's Vermont like in summer? Did you always want to work with kids?" Each one was like a gift. And one evening, as snow fell against the window, she asked something that caught me completely off guard. "Can I read your notebook?" My breath stopped. My therapy one, the real one. She nodded. "Why?" "Because I want to know if you ever wanted to give up too." I swallowed hard, then handed it to her. She took it to her room, quietly, carefully, and I waited. An hour later, she returned, held it out, eyes rimmed pink, and whispered, "You stayed." I nodded. I did. She looked at me, really looked, and smiled again, longer this time. Then she reached into her pocket and handed me something. A new sketch. Me, sitting at the table. Notebook open. Sophie beside me. And across the top, she had written, "We both stayed." That night, Jonathan knocked on my door. He looked hesitant. I meant what I said before, about staying permanently. I nodded. I've been thinking about it. And I took a deep breath. I want to stay. He exhaled like he'd been holding it for weeks. "Good," he said, smiling, "because this place feels different now." I stepped into the hallway. And just as I did, Sophie's door creaked open. She looked at us, then said, softly, "Is it okay if I have a dog birthday for Tim? Even if we don't know when he was born?" Jonathan blinked, then laughed. "Yes," he said, "absolutely." Her eyes lit up, and for the first time, she laughed. Out loud. A sound so unexpected that Maggie dropped a mixing bowl in the kitchen. But no one cared. We all just listened, until a loud knock came at the front door, and Jason's voice echoed down the hall. Claire, there's someone here asking for you." It was Vlad. I hadn't heard his voice in over 2 years. But the moment Jason said, "Someone's here asking for you," something in my stomach dropped. I stepped into the foyer, and there he was, Vlad. Same smug grin, same expensive coat, same way of looking at you like he was trying to decide what part of you to dismantle first. "Claire," he said with a tone that wrapped itself in fake nostalgia, "you look domestic." I didn't move, didn't smile, didn't invite him in. Jason stood nearby, sensing the tension. Ryan must have picked up on it too, because within seconds, he appeared from the hallway, posture easy but watchful. "What do you want?" I asked. Vlad glanced around the house, unimpressed. "Relax. I was in Vermont for the weekend. Thought I'd stop by. Catch up." "You came to the middle of nowhere to catch up with someone you emotionally manipulated and publicly humiliated." His smile didn't waver. Harsh words. "Claire, I was young. We were young." "No, I was surviving. You were playing." Jason shifted, You want me to have him leave? Vlad held up both hands. No need to get all territorial. I just wanted to see how far you've come. Looks like you're doing better. Good for you. He said it like it was a question, like it was a challenge. I took a breath and said, "You're not welcome here." Vlad's smile finally faltered. He nodded slowly, then turned toward the door. Guess we're not the same anymore. We never were. He left without another word. The moment the door shut, I realized my hands were clenched so tightly my nails had dug into my palms. That night, I found Sophie curled in her chair by the window, sketching Tim with a party hat. I sat beside her, still rattled from the encounter. "You okay?" she asked softly. It startled me. Her question, the concern. "I am now," I said, trying to smile. She stared at me for a moment. "Was that the man who hurt you?" I nodded. She looked back out the window. "He doesn't belong here." "No," I whispered. "He doesn't." The next few days passed gently. The kind of gentle that feels earned. Sophie began leaving short notes around the house. "Thanks for the cookies, Maggie," or "Tim needs more brushes." Her handwriting was careful, each word deliberate. Jonathan kept every note, tucked them into a drawer in his study like tiny artifacts of hope. Sophie even asked to help Maggie bake. Just once. The cookies came out lopsided, too soft in the middle. But she was proud. And then on a Friday morning, she did something no one expected. She knocked on my door. "I want to go outside," she said. "Okay," I said slowly. "Just the porch." "The woods?" I bundled her up in layers. Vermont snow is no joke. We took Tim. Of course he bounded ahead, his black coat a streak against the white. We walked quietly through the trees, snow crunching beneath our boots. After a while, Sophie stopped near a birch tree and pulled something from her pocket. It was a folded piece of paper. A sketch of the house, from a distance. Her in the window, me on the porch, Tim mid-run. She handed it to me. "For when I forget," she said, "that I can feel safe." I didn't cry, but I wanted to. Instead, I folded the paper carefully and placed it inside my notebook. It joined the others, each drawing a piece of something I thought I'd lost forever, belonging. When we returned to the house, I found Jonathan in the study. He looked up, eyes soft. "I keep wondering," he said, "when it's all going to collapse." "It won't," I said. "You don't know that." I know Sophie is smiling again. That's not a collapse. That's a rebuild. He looked down. "You've changed this place." I think," I said, carefully, "this place changed me." Later that night, I was tucking Sophie in when she asked, "Do you think people like us stay healed?" I sat at the edge of her bed. "No," I said gently, "but I think we stay healing, which is different. It means we're still choosing to try." She nodded, her small fingers curling into Tim's thick fur. "I want to keep trying." I brushed her hair back. "You already are." Everything felt steady. So, of course, that's when things shifted again. It started with a letter. Official, from a law firm. Jonathan read it at breakfast, lips pressed tight. He handed it to me without a word. It was from Catherine's parents, Sophie's maternal grandparents, people Jonathan had barely spoken to since the funeral. They wanted visitation. But not just that. They were requesting joint medical authority. Apparently, someone had told them Sophie wasn't receiving appropriate clinical interventions, and that Jonathan had become too emotionally entangled to act in her best interest. It was absurd. But legal? And dangerous. Because if they pushed hard enough, with the right court, they could take her away. Jonathan stood, crumpling the letter in his fist. "This is Brittany," he said through clenched teeth. "She's behind this. She knows how to stir the right pot." My chest tightened. Everything we'd built, every soft moment Sophie had finally begun to trust, was suddenly in jeopardy. We met with a lawyer 2 days later. She was blunt. They have money, influence. If they can prove Sophie's health has declined, or that your in-home care has gaps, they might get emergency orders. Jonathan looked at me. I looked at Sophie. We had to fight. Not just legally, but visibly. So I came up with an idea. Sophie had been drawing quietly for weeks, dozens of pages. What if we showed her progress not through reports, but through her own voice, her own hand? We selected 10 drawings, each dated, each showing her journey from the dim sketches to the vibrant, detailed scenes. We made copies. We wrote a letter together, Sophie and I. 1 sentence from me, 1 from her. This home helped me feel safe. I don't want to leave it. We mailed it to the judge handling the visitation petition. Then we waited. 3 days passed, and then a knock on the door. This time, it wasn't Vlad. It was Catherine's parents. In person? Sophie froze when she saw them through the window. They were polished, imposing, cold. Jonathan opened the door, blocking their path. "You weren't invited," he said. Her mother's voice was clipped. "We're her blood. We have a right to see her." "She doesn't know you." "Because you kept her from us." Sophie trembled. I stepped beside her. "She doesn't want this." Her grandfather narrowed his eyes. "And who are you to decide what she wants?" Sophie spoke. Her voice was barely above a whisper. "I decide." They turned, stared. She stepped forward. Her hands were shaking, but her voice didn't break. "I'm not a project or a problem. I'm a person, and I want to stay here." Her grandmother blinked. Tears welled, but she didn't move closer. Jonathan's voice was steel. "Leave, now." They did. Quietly, without another word. That night, Sophie handed me one last drawing. It was of her, standing in the doorway. Tim beside her. Behind her me, Jonathan, Maggie, Ryan. And across the top, in bold block letters, she had written, "Family isn't who shares your blood. It's who never walks away." I kissed her forehead. "You're braver than anyone I've ever known." She smiled. And said, "That's because you stayed." But something wasn't right. That night, as I turned out the lights and headed for bed, Jason stopped me. "Claire," he said quietly, "you might want to come out back." He looked pale, confused. I followed him through the kitchen, through the garden, to the shed near the greenhouse. The lock was broken. The door was open. Inside, the dog food bags were torn. But that wasn't what stopped me. It was the photograph pinned to the back wall. A printed image. Me standing in the kitchen, laughing. Taken through the window. From outside. Below it, in black ink, someone had written, "You can't protect her forever." The photograph still hung on the shed wall when I woke up. Me smiling, oblivious to the camera, standing in the kitchen. Beneath it, the words burned in black ink, "You can't protect her forever." I traced the letters with trembling fingers, heart pounding so loud it felt like it would shatter the quiet of the morning. That day, the air felt heavier, not just because of the snow thickening outside, but because the threat was no longer hidden. It was on the doorstep. I sat in the study with Jonathan. We went through every security feed, every door lock, every staff member's schedule. Nothing was missing. Nothing was out of place. Except for Brittany's shadow, still lingering like a stain. Jonathan leaned back, eyes tired. She knew where to strike. I nodded. "We have to be ready." Sophie was quieter than usual. I found her curled on the couch, clutching a worn-out copy of The Velveteen Rabbit, her favorite. I sat beside her, letting the silence stretch comfortably between us. Her fingers twitched on the soft cover. Finally, she looked up. Do you think bad people ever stop trying? I swallowed hard. No, but good people don't stop either. She smiled faintly. Good people like you. I reached out, brushing a stray curl behind her ear. Exactly like that. That evening, the house felt electric. Tim was restless, pacing near the door. Jason paced too. Maggie hummed a low tune, trying to keep things calm. And then the phone rang. Jonathan answered. His face paled. He hung up and looked at me. They want to meet, the grandparents. My stomach dropped. The meeting was tense. Cold smiles, legal jargon, thinly veiled threats. But Sophie was strong. She spoke for herself. For the first time, clear and steady. I don't want to leave. The room went still. Even her grandparents looked shaken. Jonathan's lawyer nodded. We have a strong case. But the fight wasn't over. Back home, I found Sophie holding my notebook. She had drawn a new picture. It was us. Together. Not perfect, but real. She said, "Thank you for not leaving." I told her, that's what family does. Days later, I walked through the snowy woods with Ryan. We paused by the frozen pond. He looked at me and said, "You're stronger than you know." I smiled. Because I'm not alone. He nodded, eyes soft. I'm glad you stayed. At the house, Jonathan pulled me aside. You've changed everything here. I thought about Sophie's smile, Tim's gentle eyes, the house filled with quiet hope. Maybe, I said softly, this is where I belong. Jonathan smiled, relief washing over his face. Welcome home, Claire. That night, Sophie slept soundly. Tim curled at her feet, and I sat by the window, the snow falling silently. The notebook lay open on my lap. I wrote the last line I ever wanted to write. Sometimes, healing isn't about fixing, it's about staying. But just as peace settled, my phone buzzed. A text?
No number.
No name. Just one sentence. You think you're safe? Think again. I stared at the screen, heart pounding. Because the fight was far from over. Thank you for watching. If you found this story inspiring, please like, comment your thoughts below, and subscribe for the full journey. Remember, family is not just who shares your blood, but who never walks away. See you in the next story, Story 2. You think you're too good for this house. Then get out. That was the last thing my aunt screamed before the door slammed behind me, cutting off the sound of her voice, but not the sting. I was 17. My name is Marble Lane. And that night, soaked to the bone in a storm that felt biblical, I knelt at the edge of Willow Creek Cemetery, clutching a wooden cross like it was the only thing left tethering me to this world. I didn't know if it was the rain or the tears blurring my vision, but honestly, it didn't matter, because either way, I couldn't see the future anymore. I whispered through chattering teeth, "Mom, I can't take it anymore." My hands, raw from scrubbing floors, clung to the cross marking her grave. The carved letters of her name, Rebecca Lane, were slick with rain. Her photo, protected behind a cracked plastic frame, smiled up at me like she still believed I'd be okay. But I wasn't. My jacket clung to me like wet paper. My knees were sunk into cold, soupy mud. Thunder cracked through the Tennessee sky. But all I could feel was her slap still burning on my cheek. That and the shame. Not because I'd refused to sit with those men in our living room, but because a part of me had frozen instead of fighting back. I'd cleaned Aunt Verity Sloane's house from top to bottom every day since my mom died. I cooked meals, patched up holes in the porch, and still got barked at like a dog that forgot its training. But that night, she crossed a line she couldn't uncross, her voice still ringing in my ears. Ungrateful brat. You think you're better than my friends? Then get out, hit harder than the slap. She didn't just want obedience. She wanted submission. And when I said no, she threw me into the night. No coat, no bag, no backup plan. Just my feet, carrying me through mud and darkness to the one place that still felt like mine. That cemetery. I remember thinking, maybe if I stay here long enough, the cold will take it all away. Maybe I won't have to wake up in that house again. Maybe the world would be kinder if I disappeared. But even as that thought settled over me like the fog, something deeper pushed back. You promised her you'd live. The words weren't loud. They didn't come from the wind or the trees. They came from memory, my mom's voice, brushing the hair behind my ear during one of our late-night study sessions. You're going to be a nurse. Baby, you'll make a difference. That dream. It had felt so far away lately. I couldn't even afford lunch, let alone college applications. And in that house, dreaming felt like a sin. I pressed my forehead to the wooden cross. I'm trying, Mom. I really am. But I don't know how much more I can take. Lightning lit up the cemetery like a flashbulb, and for a split second, everything was sharp: the soaked grass, the old birch tree behind her grave, the loneliness stretching out like a blanket over my shoulders. Then darkness again. I stayed like that for hours, maybe longer. At some point, I stopped shaking. My legs went numb. I don't remember falling asleep, just the sound of a voice breaking through the fog. Marble. Oh, my stars, child. Is that you? I blinked up through the dim, early morning gray. A figure with an umbrella, wrapped in a raincoat and worry, hurried toward me. Mrs. Eleanor Bates. She was our elderly neighbor. Used to be a school teacher back when chalkboards were still a thing. I hadn't spoken to her much since my mom's funeral, but I'd always remembered the way she held my hand that day tight, like she knew I was barely holding it together. She dropped beside me, her knees cracking. You're freezing, sweetheart. You're burning up. What are you doing out here all night? I tried to stand. My legs gave out. That's when she scooped me up under the arms, not gently, but firmly, like she was saving someone worth saving, and half dragged me toward her car. You're coming with me, and no arguments. My voice croaked as I whispered, I don't have anywhere else. I know, baby, she said softly. That's why you're not going back there. Not yet. When I woke up again, I was wrapped in a faded quilt that smelled like peppermint gum and lavender laundry detergent. I was on Mrs. Bates's couch, and the world outside the window was still gray, but inside, it was warm. For the first time in what felt like years, no one was yelling. I could hear her in the kitchen, humming to herself as she boiled water. Then footsteps. Then a cup of tea being placed in my hands. You scared the life out of me, she said gently. I already called the clinic. Doctor, Reed's on his way. I blinked. Clinic. You've got a fever. High one. You were sleeping in a rainstorm. You think that's not going to come back to bite you? Before I could answer, a knock came at the door. A few seconds later, he walked in. Doctor, Cashin Reed, 30-something, clean cut, dark-rimmed glasses, stethoscope around his neck, the kind of man who didn't need to raise his voice to command a room. He crouched beside me like I was glass. Marbell Lane, I nodded weakly. Mind if I check you out? I let him place cool fingers on my wrist. His touch was careful, clinical, but there was something else in it. Not pity, not distance, just attention. Your breathing's tight, I rasped. Feels like someone's sitting on my chest. His brow furrowed as he listened to my lungs. You've got pneumonia, he said, calm but serious. We need to get you to the hospital, now. I panicked. I don't have insurance. He held up a hand. We'll figure it out. Your job is to get better. I don't know why, but that moment broke me. Maybe it was how he said will. Like I wasn't alone in this. Mrs. Bates packed me a small overnight bag, socks, clean t-shirt, my worn library copy of Nursing Fundamentals, Volume 1. The ride to the hospital was mostly a blur. My forehead leaned against the window, rain streaking down the glass like the tears I refused to let fall. But somewhere in that haze, I remember him saying, "You're going to be okay, Marbell. You're safe now." And for the first time in a long, long time, I almost believed it. But safety doesn't last long in a town like Willow Creek. Because while I was lying in that hospital bed, drifting in and out of fever dreams, my aunt wasn't just sitting at home feeling sorry. She was talking to anyone who'd listen. And what she was saying, it was going to ruin everything. The hospital room was small, but it didn't feel like a cage. The walls were a soft cream color, the kind of warm beige that reminded me of fresh bread cooling on Mrs. Bates' kitchen windowsill. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't sleeping with one eye open or waking to the sound of a barking voice cutting through thin drywall. I was just resting. But rest has a way of making you remember what you've been running from. By day 2, the fever had broken, but my chest still hurt when I breathed too deep. Nurses came and went with gentle touches and soft voices. But it was Dr. Reed who anchored me. He never stayed long 10 minutes. Maybe 15, but he was different. He didn't just ask about my symptoms. He asked about me, what I wanted, what I was afraid of. One morning, he sat down on the edge of the windowsill with a clipboard in his lap and looked at me like he actually saw me not as a patient, not as some lost kid, but as someone who mattered. "How's the breathing today?" he asked. "Better," I said, my voice still hoarse but steadier than before. He nodded, checked my vitals, and jotted something down. Then he surprised me. "Marbell, do you have any plans for after high school?" The question hit me like cold water. I hadn't heard anyone say after high school to me in so long it almost sounded like a joke. "I did," I said quietly. "I wanted to go to nursing school. Like my mom. She was a nursing assistant and never got her license, but she always wanted me to go further." "And you still can," he said, with zero hesitation. I laughed softly. "Yeah, except I have no money, no support, and no idea where to start." He smiled, but it wasn't the kind of smile people give to brush off your pain. It was steady, grounded. You'd be surprised what's possible once you decide it's yours to claim. That stuck with me. Yours to claim. By the time I was discharged, my body was stronger, but my soul still felt shaky, like a mirror someone had put back together with glue and quiet prayers. Mrs. Bates drove me home in her old sedan, both hands clutched tight to the wheel. I didn't want the ride to end. But Willow Creek is small. We were home in 6 minutes flat. The moment we turned onto our street, I saw Aunt Verity standing on the porch, arms crossed, face pinched, like she'd been rehearsing her performance all morning. She didn't even wait for me to step out of the car before she started. "So you finally decided to come back," she snapped. I steadied myself. I was sick. Aunt Verity. I had pneumonia. Mrs. Bates found me. She cut me off with a scoff. "Oh, I know. Half the town's been whispering about poor little Marbell collapsing in a graveyard. You embarrassed me." I clenched my teeth. I didn't ask to get sick. I opened my mouth to say that, but stopped. What was the point? Instead, I just nodded. "Thanks for letting me stay." I walked past her into the house. The air inside thick with old resentment. Same peeling wallpaper. Same smell of grease and bleach. Nothing had changed. Not even my place in it. The next morning, her voice sliced through the walls before the sun even rose. "Floors aren't going to clean themselves." I blinked awake in the tiny sewing room I'd been sleeping in, still half filled with junk and broken furniture. The mattress was thin. The blankets smelled like mildew. The same walls that once heard my mother's humming now echoed with commands. I dragged myself up and did the chores, mopped the floors, washed dishes, fixed a loose fence post in the yard. And then she handed me a stack of her ex-husband's shirts and said, "Sew the buttons back on. Can't have people thinking I'm too lazy to fix things around here." They weren't even hers, weren't even his anymore. But I said nothing. I just stitched. Because in that house, silence didn't earn you peace, but speaking up only bought you war. One night, I was scrubbing the front porch when she dropped the next blow. "I invited Stephen over, and his friend's coming too. I expect you to sit like a lady and not embarrass me this time." My stomach turned. I remembered Stephen, his sour breath, the way his eyes had crawled over me the last time like I was meat in a butcher's window. And now there was another one. "No thanks," I said quietly. "I have schoolwork." She whipped around, glass in hand, cheeks flushed with frustration and maybe cheap wine. "Schoolwork," she hissed. "Don't embarrass me. Sit with us." I said no. The glass hit the table hard, but it didn't shatter. I kind of wished it had. It would have made more sense than what came next. Her hand flew across my face, sharp, fast, and full of something deeper than just anger. It was control, possession. "You think you're too good for this house?" she hissed. "Too good for my friends? Then get out. Go see how the world treats little girls who think they're better than everyone else." I stood frozen for a moment. The two men behind her chuckled quiet, but not quiet enough. That laugh, it burned more than the slap. I didn't scream, didn't throw anything. I just walked to the door, grabbed my jacket, and left. And this time, I didn't look back. When I got to the cemetery, I ran straight for the old birch tree. My mom's grave was still there, still waiting. I collapsed at her cross like it was the only home I had left. The sky broke open above me, soaking everything. I remember whispering, "Mom, I'm sorry. I don't know what else to do." I pressed my cheek to the wet wood of the cross. She hates me. She wants to break me. But something about the silence pushed back. Not loud, just steady. "Live." Same word, same promise. It didn't make anything easier, but it made me move. That mattered. The next morning, I woke up on Mrs. Bates' couch again. She'd found me a second time half-conscious, rain-soaked, and burning with fever. "You're lucky I visit my husband's grave early," she muttered, laying a fresh quilt over me. "Or else who knows how long you'd have stayed out there." That morning, she set a teacup beside me and handed me a blank card. "What's this?" I asked. "You wanted to thank someone," she said with a small smile. "Write it down." I hesitated, then scribbled something simple. "Thank you for believing in me, even when I didn't." I left it on the desk outside Dr. Reed's office the day I got discharged. It was the smallest thing, but it felt like the first choice I'd made for myself in a long, long time. But nothing stays secret in a town like Willow Creek. And while I was finally trying to crawl out of the hole I'd been buried in, someone else was already digging another, right beneath my feet. The first letter from Dr. Reed came 2 days after I left the thank you card. It was handwritten, careful, and twice as long as I expected. He'd included advice on how to start community college nursing programs, a list of scholarships I might qualify for, and a few lines that hit harder than anything else. "Don't let where you are now decide where you'll end up. You're stronger than you think." I held that letter for hours before I let myself believe it was real. For weeks, those letters became my secret lifeline. Every few days, another one arrived, sometimes slid under the front door in a plain white envelope, sometimes left in Mrs. Bates's mailbox. He never pushed, never overstepped, but somehow, he always knew exactly what I needed to hear. And for the first time in my life, I felt like someone was mapping out a way forward for me. Not because they had to, because they wanted to. I started sneaking out to the library when Verity was gone. I'd sit for hours, tracing over nursing manuals with my finger like the words were prayers. Mrs. Bates lent me her old laptop and showed me how to apply for FAFSA. One evening, she even surprised me with a second-hand backpack.
"Every girl chasing a future needs a good bag," she said, handing it over like it was a sword.
I clutched it like armor. But the thing about small towns, nothing stays quiet for long. It was a Thursday when I saw her Antonia West, a nurse from the hospital. I recognized her instantly red lips, tight bun, always standing just a little too close to Dr. Reed during rounds. She was leaning against the wall outside the grocery store, tapping something on her phone. When she saw me walking toward her, a slow smile curled across her face. "Well, look who's all cleaned up," she said sweetly. "Marbell Lane, right." I stopped. "Yeah." She stepped closer, voice sugary enough to rot teeth. "I've heard you've been close with Dr. Reed."
I swallowed. "He's just helping me with school stuff."
Her smile sharpened. "That's cute, but I'd be careful if I were you. You know he's engaged, right? Big city girl, blonde, trust fund, whole 9 yards." I blinked. He never mentioned that. "Oh, I'm sure he didn't." She leaned in. "Guys like him don't waste time on charity cases. They get bored, then they move on." Her words dropped into my chest like stones. I walked away before she could say more, but they followed me all the way home. That night, I sat at my desk with a half-written letter to Dr. Reed in my lap. The envelope was already addressed, but I couldn't finish it. My hand hovered over the page. What if she's right? What if this was never real? I folded the paper once, then again, then tore it straight down the middle. I told myself I was just tired. I told myself I'd write again later. But I didn't. Days passed, then a week, then 2. Each time his letters arrived, I left them unopened in a neat stack on the corner of my desk. Every night I'd look at them and feel something twist inside me. Doubt, shame, maybe both. One morning, as I was hauling a bag of laundry up the stairs, I found something on the porch. No envelope, no return address, just a single sheet of paper. The handwriting was jagged, slanted, almost frantic. "He's using you for fun. Stop embarrassing yourself." I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just stood there and let the blood drain from my face. I didn't know who sent it, but I could guess. That same day, I gathered all of Dr. Reed's unopened letters and shoved them in the bottom drawer of my dresser. Out of sight, out of reach. Later that night, as I tried to scrub the bathtub clean, Verity peeked in and saw the stack of envelopes still on my desk.
"What's all that love notes from your doctor boyfriend?"
I flinched. "They're about school." She laughed, a hard, barked sound that bounced off the bathroom tile. "Oh, I see. You really think a man like him would waste time on you, Marbell? Wake up. People like us don't end up with people like him." I didn't answer. I just kept scrubbing. But her voice followed me into every room after that. That weekend, I skipped the library. I skipped everything. I folded myself back into the old Rhythms laundry. Dishes, silence. I stopped reaching for the manuals, stopped reading, stopped dreaming. And that's exactly where she wanted me. 3 days later, there was a knock at the front door. I opened it without thinking, and froze. Dr. Reed stood on the porch, damp from rain, holding the first letter I'd ever sent him in one hand. "Hey," he said gently, "did I do something wrong? You stopped writing." I tried to smile, failed. I just thought maybe you were too busy, that you had other priorities. His brow furrowed. "Is that what someone told you?" I hesitated, then nodded. His expression darkened, not angry, but protective. "Can we talk?" he asked. I nodded again. We sat on the front steps, the rain falling in soft sheets off the roof. Inside, I could hear Verity moving around the kitchen, pretending not to listen. "Doctor?" Reed looked straight ahead as he spoke. "Whoever told you that I was engaged, or that I don't care, doesn't know me, and I don't want you believing lies about who you are to me." My breath caught, but I'm not. I'm not anyone. "You are," he said firmly. "You're someone who's been dealt a terrible hand and still shows up, still fights. That's not weakness. Marbell, that's grit." My throat tightened. "I didn't want to bother you." "You're not a bother," he said, turning to face me. "But if you don't want my help, I'll respect that. I just don't want you throwing away your dreams because someone else tried to make you small." Then he said it softly, but with weight. "And if it wasn't clear before, I care about what happens to you, not as a doctor, but as someone who matters." I didn't speak. I couldn't, because deep down, I knew I'd believed the wrong people for too long. Just then, Verity stormed out onto the porch. "This is ridiculous. She's staying here. She's not running off to play Florence Nightingale because you filled her head with nonsense." "Doctor?" Reed stood slowly, calm, but solid. "With all due respect, Ms. Sloane, she's 17. She has every right to choose her own future." "She has no future without this house." Verity snapped. And that's when it happened. A voice rang out from behind us. "Actually," said Mrs. Bates, climbing the porch steps, folder in hand, "this house belongs to Marble." Verity went pale. "That's a lie." Mrs. Bates held out the document. "It's not. I went to the county office this morning, found the original will. Rebecca left the house to her daughter, not to you." Silence swallowed the porch whole. For once, Verity had no words. She turned on her heel and slammed the door behind her, the echo shaking the frame. "Doctor?" Reed looked at me, a slow smile spreading across his face. "Well," he said, "looks like your life just changed again." I looked down at the folder in my hands, then back at him, and for the first time, I believed it. I sat on the porch long after Dr. Reed and Mrs. Bates had gone, the folder still open on my lap, pages fluttering in the evening breeze like it couldn't wait to breathe for me. The deed. The will. My name, Marbell Lane, in legal ink that couldn't be ignored anymore. All those years, I believed this house was something I owed, something I borrowed, something I had to earn. But my mother had already chosen me. I was the one meant to live here, not just survive here. And now that truth was in my hands. I expected to feel rage, to want to scream at the walls and tear the wallpaper down with my bare fingers. But what I felt instead was quiet. Stillness. Like the storm inside me had finally exhausted itself. That night, I sat on the floor of the tiny sewing room, where I'd been sleeping like a guest in my own life. I stared at the box of nursing manuals under the bed, the ones I used to hide like contraband. I pulled them out one by one, spread them across the floor, and this time, I didn't flinch when I opened them. I didn't keep one ear open for footsteps. I was done hiding. The next morning, I moved my things back into my old bedroom. It had been turned into a storage space, a graveyard of broken furniture and dusty boxes with labels like XMAS 2004 and Don't Touch. It took me 3 hours to clear it out, another 2 to scrub the walls. By afternoon, I was standing on a step stool, rolling sage green paint onto the walls my mom once hung fairy lights on. I kept the window open, let the breeze carry out years of mold, resentment, and old silence. I even planted daisies under the front window, my mom's favorite. They stood straight in the soil like they knew they finally belonged. Just like me, Verity didn't come home that night. Or the next. By day 3, I found a note on the kitchen counter. "Staying with Carla. Don't wreck the place." No apology, no explanation. Just distance. I read it 3 times, and then smiled. because I didn't need an apology to start over. That week, Mrs. Bates stopped by with a tuna casserole and a stack of community college brochures. I circled the nursing programs, she said, and highlighted the deadlines. You've got 2 months. Just enough time. I blinked. You did all that? You think I knit quilts and watch court shows all day? She grinned. I believe in you, sweetheart. Always have. Her eyes welled, but she didn't let a tear fall. You've got the house. Now take the future too. Doctor. Reed came by the next day, not with a stethoscope or clipboard, but with 2 coffees and a thumb drive. Scholarship files, he said, holding it out like it was gold. Letters of recommendation, application samples, essay tips. Some from my med school days, some from old students. Students, I asked, eyebrows raised. He shrugged. I used to volunteer at the community center, helped kids apply for programs. You're not my first. His voice was casual, but his eyes said something else. I took the coffee, and for the first time, I didn't feel like a patient. I felt like a peer, like someone worth investing in. We sat on the porch steps, talking about books, the town, and how spring always smelled like burnt toast in Willow Creek, probably from old wiring in the bakery across the street. It was quiet, simple, easy. And I realized I didn't need anything else just yet. Later that night, I wrote a letter. Not to Dr. Reed, not to Mrs. Bates, to my mom. I sat at my desk with one of the blank cards from Mrs. Bates's drawer and wrote slowly, letting the words pour out like I was speaking from somewhere older than 17. Mom, I got the house back. It was mine all along. You made sure of that, even if I didn't know it. I'm sorry it took me so long to believe you. But I'm going to be a nurse, just like you wanted. And I promise I won't just survive. I'll live. Love, Marbell. The next morning, I walked to the cemetery alone. The skies were clear, the wind gentle. I knelt beside her cross, brushed away the leaves, and tucked the envelope beneath the plastic photo. Her smile behind the fogged plastic still made my chest ache. But this time, it didn't hurt the same. This time, it felt like peace. The days that followed were full. I started shadowing at the local hospital through a volunteer program Dr. Reed helped me apply for. I folded linens. I delivered trays. I watched the nurses move like a choreographed team, balancing efficiency and empathy with every patient. It was everything I'd dreamed of, and harder than I'd imagined. There were moments I'd stand frozen outside a room, terrified I'd screw up something simple. But then I'd remember I've already survived worse than this. I wasn't the smartest. I wasn't the fastest. But I was trying. And that mattered. One afternoon, as I sat in the break room skimming a study guide, Antonia walked in. She stopped when she saw me. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. Well, look who's back. I stood, calm, steady. Didn't think you'd still be around, she added, stirring her coffee. Thought maybe your little rescue act would fizzle out by now. I didn't respond, just picked up my folder and walked past her. She followed. You think Dr. Reed's gonna get you into school? Into some big-time hospital? Come on, Marbell. You're still the same girl from the porch. I turned. No, I said quietly. I'm not. And I left her standing there. But that night, when I got home, something felt off. The porch light was out, the door slightly ajar. Inside, drawers had been opened, the living room cushions tossed, cabinets left swinging. I stepped inside slowly, heart hammering. Then I saw it. The folder. The one with the deed and will inside. Gone. I stood frozen in the middle of my living room, the silence screaming louder than any argument I'd ever had with Verity. The folder was gone. The one with the will. The deed. My name in black and white proof that this house, this life was mine now, and someone had taken it. I checked the front door again. No signs of forced entry. No shattered glass. Nothing broken except my trust in what felt safe. But I knew I didn't need a signature to guess who'd been here. Verity. I called Mrs. Bates first. My voice was shaking.
She was here, I whispered. She took the documents.
There was a pause on the other end, then a soft sigh, like she'd been waiting for this moment to happen. I had a feeling she might. She said, "Listen, Marbell, you still have rights. The county has a certified copy on file. I can go with you tomorrow morning and help request another. But what if she files something, changes something? She can't change the past, sweetheart, and she can't unwrite a legal will. Trust me, we're not done fighting." I stared down at the empty spot on my bookshelf where the folder used to sit. My knees gave way, and I slid to the floor, back against the wall. "I thought she was gone," I said. "I thought we were done." Mrs. Bates's voice didn't waver. People like her don't let go of control, not without one last swing. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak in the floorboards felt like footsteps. Every shadow stretched too long. So I pulled out the stack of letters I'd hidden from Dr. Reed weeks ago, still unread, still bound by my own fear. I opened the first one. "I hope you're doing okay. I know small towns can feel like cages sometimes, but you're not trapped anymore." The second, "Don't forget that the same hands that clean floors can also heal wounds. You already have everything it takes. Now it's just about not letting anyone convince you otherwise." By the third, my hands were trembling. By the fifth, I was crying. And by the seventh, I was writing him a new letter. Not about dreams or school this time. About the house. About Verity. About the break-in and the missing will. I didn't ask him to fix it. I just asked him to believe me. The next morning, I met Mrs. Bates at the county clerk's office. She wore her good scarf, the one with the little yellow birds, and walked like she owned the building. We requested another certified copy of the will. The clerk handed it over like it was a library book. Just like that, my proof was back. But my peace wasn't, because 2 hours later, I got a call from the hospital. Not about my volunteer shift. From Antonia. "Marbell," she said, sickly sweet. "Just thought you should know. Verity was here earlier. Said she needed your file, something about confirming your residence for legal purposes." My stomach flipped. "She's not on my file," I said quickly. "She's not authorized for anything." "I know," Antonia said. "I didn't give her anything, but I figured you should know she's asking questions." Then her voice dipped. "Also, you should watch your back. She's not just angry, she's embarrassed. And people like her, they don't fight fair." I hung up and sat on the steps outside the hospital, the sun sharp and hot against my skin. This wasn't about a house anymore. This was war. Over the next few days, I made a plan. I scanned the new copy of the will, made 3 backups, uploaded it to the cloud, gave Mrs. Bates a physical copy. I cleaned the house, top to bottom, not out of duty, but ownership. I replaced the locks, reset passwords, changed the alarm code I didn't even know we had. Every action was like reclaiming a brick in the foundation of a life I'd almost let her steal again. Then I wrote a second letter. This one wasn't for Dr. Reed or my mom. It was for Verity. "I know you took the documents. You don't scare me anymore. This house is mine. And no matter what lies you tell, the law agrees. If you come here again without my invitation, I will file for a restraining order. You taught me how to survive. But now I'm learning how to fight." I didn't send it. I taped it to the inside of the front door, just in case she ever came back. When I returned to the hospital for my next volunteer shift, I found Dr. Reed waiting at the nurse's station. "I got your letter," he said quietly. His eyes searched mine, not for lies, but for cracks. "You okay?" "I'm tired," I said, "but not afraid." He nodded, then reached into his pocket. "I also brought this," he said, handing me a small keychain, a daisy made of enamel, dangling from a silver loop. "I saw it at the hardware store." He shrugged. "Figured it might remind you that you've already started something beautiful." I turned it over in my hands, that soft warmth blooming again in my chest. The same feeling I had when I planted the flowers outside. A symbol of what was mine, of what I was becoming. But peace doesn't last long in Willow Creek. Because the next night, as I stood brushing my teeth before bed, there was a knock at the front door. Not a soft one.
A loud, sharp, I'm not here to be polite kind of knock.
I wiped my hands and walked slowly down the hallway. Opened the door, and there she was. Verity. Hair slicked back, lipstick perfect, holding a clipboard in one hand and a lawyer standing just behind her. She smiled like she'd already won. "You've been squatting long enough. Marbell," she said. "We're filing for eviction." I stood in the doorway, barefoot, holding a damp towel in one hand and the daisy keychain in the other. And there she was, Verity, dressed like she was going to Sunday court, with a man beside her in a stiff navy suit and a clipboard full of something she clearly thought could undo the law. "You've been squatting," she repeated. "We're filing for eviction. You have 30 days. I laughed. Not loud, not cruel, just disbelieving. "You're standing on my porch," I said. She raised her chin. "It's not your porch until a judge says so." I glanced at the lawyer. He shifted awkwardly under my gaze, clearly uncomfortable.
I have the will, thus, I said, a certified copy. From the clerk's office. You know that. She stepped forward. "You think a piece of paper is going to save you? That house was mine for over a decade. I paid the bills. I kept it from falling apart."
"You used it to control me," I said, voice steady. "You erased my mother. You erased me." Her eyes narrowed. "You want to do this in court, fine. Let's do it." Then she turned and walked down the steps, her lawyer trailing behind her, silent. By the next morning, the entire town knew. At the grocery store, I heard whispers. At the library, 2 old ladies stopped talking the second I walked by. Even at the hospital, I caught a few sideways glances. No one said anything to my face, but I could feel it. The headlines were invisible but heavy. "Teen girl kicks out aunt who raised her." "Family house in dispute. Town legacy questioned." "That Lane girl thinks she's better than blood." "Mrs. Bates called me that night. You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, staring at the stack of documents on the kitchen table. "No, you're not. But you will be." She came by the next day with a casserole and a strategy. "I found a pro bono legal clinic in Knoxville," she said, unfolding a printout. "They specialize in inheritance disputes. I already called. They're willing to help." I told them everything. I blinked at her. Everything. She smirked. "Well, not the part where I wanted to hit Verity with a frying pan, but the rest, yeah." We called. We emailed. We scanned documents and signed affidavits. For the first time, I had someone backing me who wasn't just kind, they were professional. I wasn't just surviving. I was fighting smart. Meanwhile, Dr. Reed stayed close, but never pushy. He dropped by with folders of nursing school options, scholarship deadlines, and free clinic hours where I could log experience for my application. One night, he brought over 2 microwavable burritos and sat with me on the back porch while the crickets screamed into the dark.
"You doing okay with all the noise?" he asked.
"I think I'm finally getting used to people doubting me," I said. "They've been doing it so long, it just feels like weather now." He nodded. "Weather can wear you down." But it can also grow things, I added, thinking of the daisies. He smiled. That's true. We sat in silence for a while, and then I said it what had been resting just under my ribs for days. I'm not afraid of losing the house. He glanced at me, surprised. I'm afraid of losing me, of going back to being that girl who said yes to everything, because saying no meant punishment. You're not that girl anymore, he said. I know, I whispered, but she still lives in the hallway sometimes. The court hearing was scheduled 3 weeks later. Verity showed up in a stiff gray pantsuit. Her lawyer carried a tablet, not a clipboard this time. She didn't look at me as we sat on opposite sides of the small courtroom in the county courthouse. I brought the certified will, the deed, my mother's last tax filing, and Mrs. Bates, who offered to testify. Verity's lawyer argued adverse possession, said she'd paid the taxes, made home improvements, lived there as if it were hers. But then the judge read aloud my mom's will. Her voice was firm, almost annoyed. Aita, Rebecca Lane, Osai, leave the entirety of my property located at 118 Sycamore Street to my daughter, Marbell Lane, upon my death. That sentence undid everything. Verity's face didn't fall. It cracked like a mask that had dried too long. The judge continued. It is clear from legal documentation that this house was never hers to claim. There is no basis for eviction. The rightful owner is Marbell Lane. I didn't cry. I didn't cheer. I just exhaled for the first time in weeks. Outside the courthouse, Verity caught up to me on the steps. You think this makes you better than me? She hissed. No, I said. It makes me free from you. She blinked, as if that hurt more than anything else I could have said. Then she turned and walked away. No more threats, no more lawsuits. Just distance. This time, it felt final. The next morning, I woke early and made coffee in silence. The light streamed through the front window. The daisies I planted weeks ago had started to bloom wider, their petals sun-hungry and soft. I poured myself a cup and stood in the doorway, watching the neighborhood wake up. And for once, I didn't feel like I was trespassing in my own life. A week later, I got an email. Congratulations. You've been accepted into Willow Creek Community College's nursing program for the fall semester. I stared at the screen. Then I reread it. Then I cried. But not from fear, not from shame. From something I hadn't felt in years. Joy. I printed the letter, taped it to the refrigerator, sent a copy to Dr. Reed and Mrs. Bates. Then I sat on the porch steps and just breathed. No chores, no yelling, no dread. Just breath, just life. But peace, as I'd learned, is not the end of the story. It's the beginning of the next chapter. Because later that afternoon, I walked out to check the mail and found a small envelope addressed to me in delicate handwriting I didn't recognize. Inside was a folded sheet of expensive stationery. The message: You may have won the house, but not everyone believes you deserve it. Some debts don't disappear. No name, no return address. Just one thing at the bottom. A printed photo of me and Dr. Reed, sitting on my porch, smiling. The morning light filtered softly through my bedroom window, casting long shadows on the fresh sage-green walls I had painted myself. The daisies I planted by the porch swayed gently outside, their white petals glowing in the early sun, symbols of new beginnings and quiet strength. I sat on the edge of my bed, the weight of the last few months finally settling into something I could carry. The house was mine. The future, once a distant dream, was now within reach. But inside me, a storm still brewed. I reached for the envelope that had arrived the day before, the one with no name, no return address, just that chilling message. You may have won the house, but not everyone believes you deserve it. Some debts don't disappear. And the photo, me and Dr. Reed smiling on the porch.
I folded it carefully and slipped it into a drawer, not ready to face the fear it stirred.
Days turned into weeks, and life moved forward.
At the hospital, I shadowed nurses with a hunger I hadn't known I had. The scrubs felt strange at first, too big, too loose. But soon, they fit like armor. The rhythms of the ward, the quiet urgency of saving lives, it became my world.
I found myself laughing again with Mrs. Bates over burnt toast and stories of Old Willow Creek.
And Dr. Reed, he was always there, not as a savior, but as a steady presence.
One evening, after a long shift, I found myself standing at my mother's grave again. The cross was weathered, the photo faded, but her smile was as warm as ever.
I knelt, brushing leaves off the marker.
"Mom," I whispered, my voice thick with hope and exhaustion. "I'm doing it. I'm really living."
But healing isn't a straight path. Late one night, as I was closing up the kitchen, the doorbell rang. My heart jumped. Through the peephole, I saw a figure standing in the dark. Verity. She looked tired, older somehow. Her eyes held a strange mix of anger and something softer. Regret.
I didn't open the door.
Instead, I watched as she left a small package on the porch and walked away without a word.
Inside the box was a letter. Handwritten. Careful. It read, "Oh,
I was wrong. You are better than I ever gave you credit for. I'm sorry for the pain I caused. The house is yours. The future is yours. Find peace. Marbelle, I hope you do what I never could." Tears blurred my vision as I held the letter close. In that moment, I realized something important.
Revenge wasn't what I wanted.
Justice wasn't about taking. It was about letting go.
I took the letter to Dr. Reed the next day.
He smiled, eyes kind and steady. "Sometimes the hardest battles are the ones we fight inside ourselves," he said softly. I nodded. "I'm ready now," I said, "to live, to heal, to be more than what I was told I could be." The house felt warmer that day, not because of the sun or the fresh paint, but because it was truly mine. A place where I belonged, where I could build the life my mother dreamed of. Sometimes, healing isn't about fixing broken people. It's about choosing not to break with them.
And building something beautiful out of what's left.
So, here I am. Not perfect. Still learning, but alive. And free. What would you do if you found out the house you thought you'd lost was yours all along? Have you ever had to fight for your dreams against the odds?
Let me know in the comments.
Don't forget to like and subscribe if you believe in second chances, because sometimes that's all we really need.